Don't Depend on Daddy is an unfiltered safe space, empowering young professionals to build independence in their 20s and beyond, whether it be personal, professional, or financial. Regardless of your age, relationship status, or job title, the most consistent person in your life is you. So join me and let's build our independence together. Enjoy! Hello and welcome back to Don't Depend on Daddy, the podcast. My name's Michaela. I am your host. I'm so excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking about our 30s. I have gotten so many requests from those of you who are listening in your 30s or your late 20s, looking for some more content that is geared toward this phase of life, because I do recognize a lot of my content is more like older sister content geared towards people in their early or mid 20s. And so we're going to be a little bit more forward thinking today and talk about ways that I am elevating my life, money, career, and personal life as I enter my 30s, because I just turned 30. In case you didn't know, I've talked about it like 1,000 freaking times on here. Anyways, before we get into it, we're going to run through our housekeeping super quickly. If you are new here, I'm sure this is the first time you're hearing the spiel. If you are a returning listener, you know the drill. Anyways, first things first, as always, you can get $10 off the personal finance dashboard using the code podcast1. That is a podcast exclusive code. If you are new here, the personal finance dashboard is my signature money management tool. So if you are someone who is looking to pay off debt, grow your net worth, increase your wealth, feel financially free, financially confident, I highly recommend checking out the personal finance dashboard. If you are someone who is newer on your financial journey and you're looking for a tool to get into the habit of building out a budget, tracking your expenses, I recommend you check out my tool called the Basic Budgeting Template. This is more of a starter tool, and it's great for getting started with a budget, and then ultimately you can graduate and purchase the PFD and upgrade. There's a code in there for you as well if that is something you decide to do. And last but not least, my financial independence planner. If you are someone who is looking to answer the question, how much do I need to save and invest for retirement every year? How much should I be spending? How much should I be saving? What the heck am I even doing? The financial independence planner is going to help you. What it will do is map out your plan towards retirement, whether you want to retire early or you just want to retire at traditional age. It can help you put together a plan no matter what. I built this tool earlier this year because I discovered financial independence and what that path could look like. And I really wanted to know with clarity what exact steps I needed to take in order to retire early, become work optional. I talk about this a lot over on Instagram and TikTok. So highly recommend, joining the party over there if you are not already there. I'm sure you are if you're listening to this podcast. But anyways, definitely recommend checking that out. I did a video recently about financial independence and whatnot, so I'll make sure that is linked. I have a couple of videos about it as well. Friendly reminder that I do record these podcasts as video if you are listening in your ears on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So if you want to see the video and chat with me, make sure you come join me on YouTube. I'm having so much fun with YouTube. I'm finally seeing some real progress on YouTube, and it's super exciting. So thanks for being here. And I think that's it. So with that, let's get into the bulk of today's episode. So I turned 30 about a month and a half ago. Can't believe it's already been that long. That makes me nervous. Anyways, well, I don't obviously want all of my content to be so age specific. I do really want to pay a little extra mind to the gals in their 30s and late 20s because, as I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of my content can be geared towards early mid 20s, and that's not necessarily going to change, but I do want to also start sprinkling in some 30s advice because I'm in my 30s now, so it feels age appropriate, obviously. So we're going to be talking about things you can do to elevate your life in your 30s and like the things that I am already actively doing and things that I am planning to do because we don't have to do everything all at once. I'm starting to see a lot more discourse online around all of the positive parts of being in your 30s, which I love, and how when you enter your 30s, it really does feel like you are entering the start of the prime of your life. I think the 20s are the most misbranded decade of our lives, where we're kind of told your 20s are the best years of your lives, but like everyone who's experienced their 20s, whether you're in it or you're out of it, knows that that's not real. So there's all these expectations for your 20s and like all of these boxes that you think you need to check. Like, I have to have my dream job. I have to become debt free. I have to save 100K. I have to get married. I have to have a kid. Like, I have to do all these things. And 30 is the finish line. And I just think that putting all of this pressure on yourself to figure all of these enormous life decisions and life milestones when you're really just a baby is insane. Like, it's actually insane. I felt like at 27, I was so old. And now that I'm 30, I look back at people who are 27 and I'm like, you guys know nothing. You have no idea what you are in for. And I think you start to understand that sentiment more and more every year as you like get older. If you agree, disagree, let me know politely, of course. So obviously, it's super important to make the most of your 20s. I don't want to discount that. I feel like I made the most of my 20s in the ways that I could. And you want to make sure you're taking strides to push your life forward. But you don't have to accomplish everything in your 20s. And if you do, then what are you doing the rest of your life? Like, why do we forget that we have life to live between 30 and 60? Like, that's an entire third of your life. We're only focused on reaching 30 and then retirement age and forgetting about the fact that you're going to experience your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. And that's like an incredibly long period of your life where you're actually like a sentient, aware, conscious, fully functioning adult who has autonomy to make decisions about your life and hopefully a little bit of money to decide what you want to do. Why are we just totally skipping over that huge, huge, huge third of your life? I think it's insane. So we're embracing our 30s in this corner of the internet. This is the first year of, what hopefully will be the rest of my life. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm going to be covering the 3 key areas that I always talk about: money, career, and just personal life in general. And I'm going to talk about all the changes I'm making and then like suggestions, benchmarks, etc. that you can think about as well. Again, I'm sharing things that I'm doing in my 30s. This can apply to any age, whether you're, 25, 35, 45, it doesn't matter. Use your free will and critical thinking skills to make adjustments as needed, please. With that, let's get right into it. So we're going to start off with money, of course, because money is my favorite thing to talk about. So financially, as I personally enter my 30s, I feel pretty good. I'm not going to lie about that. I feel really confident with my finances at the moment. And I do feel like from a trajectory standpoint, I'm kind of on the right path. Obviously, because I have a business, year over year, things shift, they change. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm feeling good with the progress I've made thus far. That being said, every year it does feel like things are getting more and more expensive in ways that we cannot control. And even if I want to make small upgrades to my life, it's like, okay, why is it so expensive to do fucking everything? And I do think that that just makes life feel a little bit financially more difficult. But I'm happy with the progress I made in my 20s. And I really do feel like I've put myself in a position where I have options going into my 30s, which is something that in my early 20s, I didn't really ever consider to be something I was working towards. I didn't even know having options in your 30s was an option. I just never really thought about it. So I'm actually really happy with how I'm feeling going into this period of my life from a dollars standpoint. I don't have too many major financial changes that I'm making in my 30s, but I do think when you enter your 30s, you start thinking about money a little bit differently. And this is something to consider if you're in your late 20s too. Like, I think the goal for turning 30 is to make sure your ducks are in a row in terms of the basics, right? So you have all the right accounts set up. You have a checking account, a high yield savings account, you're contributing to your retirement accounts, and maybe you've started investing beyond retirement. You have a pretty rock solid budget and a good grasp on your expenses and the changes that will be happening to your expenses, year over year as your life starts to change. You have a financial routine in place. So you have a system where you're monitoring your budget. Maybe you've paid off your debt or you're making strides to pay off your debt over the next couple of years. These to me are the financial basics. And the goal, again, by 30 isn't necessarily to hit a specific net worth milestone. I do think, generally speaking, focusing on a number in your bank account is not the best strategy to take because the benchmark is always going to be moving. I think really you should focus on having the basics checked off. So assuming you're turning 30 and you're feeling good about where you are, what do you do? And from my lens, there are a couple of key areas to look at and like key things that I'm looking at. So first is having a rock solid financial independence plan. And I think we have to use financial independence in the definition of it very loosely because financial independence looks different for everyone. So really the goal with this is to know your numbers. So knowing like your Coast-Fi number, your traditional retirement number, and your broader and bigger money targets. So generally speaking, with the projections that you're using, so we want to think about inflation, we want to think about salary growth, we want to think about how your spending can change, we want to think about if you're going to have a family or if you already have a family, because at 30, a lot of people already have kids, which I can't comprehend, but I know it's a reality for many. What are those annual spending and savings targets? Even if financial independence isn't necessarily something you want to achieve in the sense of retiring early, knowing what your Coast-Fi target number is and how much you need to actually have saved in retirement is crucial for not only financial planning, but also for career planning. And this is especially important if you have a family or are planning to have a family because it can help inform financial decisions for your entire family. So for example, if like you and your partner have combined already hit Coast-Fi, one of you might not have to work. Like you can actually make these bigger life decisions if you know what these numbers are, especially if you're in your 20s or your early 30s and you don't have kids and it's something that you want. If you do proper financial planning up until that point, you can actually have a totally different experience raising children, starting a family, whatever, if you've already hit like some retirement numbers in your 20s and early 30s. So I know that sometimes financial independence can feel like this thing that's totally out of reach. I think Coast-Fi is really the target that most of us should be trying to get to in our 20s and early 30s, especially pre having kids if possible, again, if that's something that you want. There's so much value in understanding and knowing these numbers no matter what. And I highly recommend that you take the time to do it. You have to already know what your spending is. You have to kind of already have an idea of what your net worth is. All of those things you can do within the personal finance dashboard. And then if you want to plan out like your FIRE plan, obviously I have a template for that too because I have a template for everything. It's all in the show notes. And you can go back and watch some of my other YouTube videos as well where I talk about this. But it's so important. I cannot emphasize it enough. I think we think about FIRE as like, oh, well, you just do FIRE if you don't want to work and you don't want to have kids and you don't want to do all these things. And there's just so many elements to it that I think can be factored in for family planning. So once you hit 30, it kind of feels like that's what everybody's asking you. Like, oh, are you going to get married? Are you going to have kids? Are you going to do all these things if they haven't started asking you that already? And the financials of that are enormous and a huge part of the decision. So I'll leave it at that. Next is clarity around a game plan for property. So at least a general idea of like potentially where you'd want to purchase property and how much you would be willing to spend or how much you could afford. Again, if property is something that you haven't already done in your 20s, I know people are purchasing homes later. I want to, I'm going to come out and say it if you don't already know. I'm single, I don't have kids, I don't own property, and I'm 30. And for a lot of people, I am, their worst nightmare in terms of I never want to be that person who's all of those things. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think I'm a pretty good example of like your life is totally fine if that's your circumstance. However, I do think that if you don't own property at 30, which most people don't, to be super clear, most people don't. I'm not insinuating that they do. Having a generalized game plan of like what you would want that to look like in your 30s is kind of an important thing to think about. Timeline obviously can be vague because it's dependent on so many factors, but it's a great time to start thinking about if you do want to own, what could that look like? Do you have a savings plan in order to get there? Do you have money already? Would you potentially be inheriting money from members of your family or receiving a gift? When I think about my own life, like I have a general sense that I want to purchase property probably at some time in my mid 30s. And ideally it will be in New England, but I'm open obviously because I live in Chicago. If I were to meet somebody here, maybe I would stay here. I don't know. It's not what I want, but I'm open to it. We'll see how the next few years sort of unfold. So I've just been working to set money aside pretty casually over the last couple of years for a down payment. Ultimately, given interest rates, if they don't change dramatically over the next few years, like I'd want to purchase property in cash so that I don't have to deal with interest rates and, overpaying for a home. But that obviously requires saving up a lot of cash, and that's an extenuating circumstance, and I don't know if that's even going to be possible. So I generally have a sense of what I'm looking for, and I generally have a vague timeline, and I'm using that to sort of inform the amount of cash I'm holding, where I'm putting my money, if I'm investing that money, etc. So I think having a game plan, a loose game plan, is really important when you turn 30 if you don't have one already. And the last layer about the financials is really getting clear on how you spend your money for enjoyment. How can you use your money to enrich your life? I have been really enjoying over, I would say, my time living in Chicago so far, and even the last couple of years when I was in LA, learning how to spend my money in a way that truly and genuinely adds value to my life, that I actually enjoy. I love taking tennis lessons. I love going to Pilates classes. I love buying nice clothes. I'm really enjoying upgrading these these areas of my life. I'm thinking about potentially joining a gym, a luxury gym, as sort of a third space for co-working and whatnot. So we'll see. But generally speaking, at 30, you should start to get a better idea of what your spending values are and get clear on what you enjoy spending your money on, and really stop spending your money on random shit. I think in your 20s, it's a little bit easier to make excuses around there. But once you hit 30, it's kind of time to get very, very, very clear on how am I using my money? Are these habits positive and beneficial to me? And if they're not, what changes do I need to make? What patterns do I have to pay attention to? What routines need to shift in order for me to be super, super clear on, am I spending money on things that are actually enriching and adding value to my life? I did do an entire video about financial changes I'm making in my 30s. I touched on some of these, but I also touched on some different things as well. So if you're interested in checking that out, I'll also make sure it's linked somewhere on the screen. I'll do my best as well to remember to link it in the show notes. Okay, now we're going to pivot on to career. And I think ultimately, the goal in your 30s is to start hitting your stride professionally, okay? Are you enjoying the path that you're on? Because you've likely had in your 20s the opportunity to explore new things. And if you're in your 20s and you hate your job and you hate your life, first of all, you should read my book, Own Your Career. But second of all, you got to do something about that. You got to take a risk. You got to take a chance. You got to make a change. You have to do something, because you don't just magically figure out your career at 30. Kind of by your early 30s, you should have a general sense of okay, I'm on the path I want to be on. I may not be exactly where I want to be quite yet, but I'm at least moving in that direction. That I feel is a good goal for hitting 30. So maybe this means going back to school. It could mean exploring a side hustle. Maybe your 30s is when you're going to take those steps, but generally having a sense of, are you enjoying the path you're on? The goal of this decade, at least for me, is to really figure out what I actually enjoy and settle into a career that feels stable. I feel very lucky that I sort of figured this out a little bit earlier. Part of that was strategy. A huge element was luck with social media. And so hopefully Break Your Budget is something that I can maintain for the next couple of years. I would love to continue to do what I'm doing, and I've been making some changes in order to do that, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the goal, again, in your 30s is to figure out okay, where's my sweet spot here professionally? So a few questions you can ask yourself. What would you need at work in order to truly feel successful? Is it a salary range? Is it a degree of work-life balance? Is it being at a specific type of company, or, have a specific growth trajectory? Are you interested in a career pivot maybe? And can you take classes or courses or something to explore that? I'm a huge fan of taking online courses and really trying to figure out what you're interested in. So you can do that with Skillshare. One of my prior videos about content creation, I talked about Skillshare a little bit and I had a link there. It could be, taking a class on LinkedIn Learning, a certification that's funded through your job, whatever. But if you're hating what you're doing and you want to be doing something else, you kind of have to take the initiative to make some of those changes. And I think the easiest, lowest hanging fruit is to take a course or a class or something. and just get the ball rolling in terms of learning about it. The next would be thinking about time management and really evaluating how you're doing with what I like to call life work balance, because I think we need to stop prioritizing work over our life and swap work life balance with life work balance. I put life first because generally speaking, the way that we culturally approach work is like work is the highest priority, it's the most important thing. And I feel like people get a lot of validation out of this, and I just don't understand it. And maybe that's why I was not very successful in my corporate career. But I even saw a TikTok fairly recently about someone who was talking about how, when she's at work, work is the most important thing ever to her, whatever. And I respect that, but I don't understand it. I do think, generally speaking, we need to start making our personal lives like a little bit more of a priority, and have a lot of the decisions in your life be driven by what you want out of your life first and work second. So a perfectly classic example of this is when people move to a city just because they're moving there for a job and they're not thinking about the fact that, like, does this city offer things for me that will actually enrich my life? I don't think you should do that. Maybe in your 20s for a very specific job, okay, but I think you should choose a city based on where you want to live and find a career path that sort of suits that in general. Maybe that's a different conversation. If you're interested, let me know. But ideally, the goal with life work balance is to find time in your day and space in your life where you can actually explore things outside of the office and not glamorize work so much. So again, that could be exploring hobbies, it could be exploring and having time with your family, whatever. But really, really, really hitting a point in your career where you have time and space to not be grinding 24/7, which I think is glorified in your 20s. The last layer of this is exploring like a side hustle or a passion project of yours. Is there anything that you truly enjoy doing or working on that can become a monetization pathway, whether that be part-time, full-time, whatever? I love the idea of having a multifaceted career path, and I think this is becoming a lot more normal. Unfortunately, it's also becoming a lot more necessary just through the need to have like two jobs, which I don't particularly love, but play the game or get played is kind of my motto there. That being said, your 30s are a great time to explore those passions and really think about, like, is there something I actually enjoy, and plant the seeds when you have a little bit more, hopefully, financial stability and just like stability in your life in general. When I think about professional changes in my 30s, there are a few things that come to mind. Really, a lot of this is centered on my business and being a business-oriented entrepreneurial person. I, again, feel very lucky that I was able to start and establish Break Your Budget in my 20s and find this passion of mine and interest of mine and turn it into my job. But there are things that, obviously will change as I get older, whatever. So I want to continue working on Break Your Budget. I would like for this to be my job for many, many years to come. I have no intentions of stepping away from it or changing anything dramatically, but I am focusing a lot more on longer form content in YouTube, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. And just generally like pivoting a lot of my content to more thought forward content on my social media platforms, because I find it to be more satisfying. I find it to be a lot more engaging. It's a little bit more challenging for me, and it stimulates my brain in a different way. So hopefully that continues to work well for me. But also exploring again and bringing back my personal page. I kind of took a bit of a hiatus from that, but it is something that I would like to bring back and sort of start sharing and documenting different aspects of my life beyond just the financial stuff. I also signed with new management, so that hopefully is going to be elevating my brand and just helping me take a different look at things, work with different kinds of brands, etc. And generally speaking, like, I'm pretty open to seeing what comes my way professionally in my 30s. I love doing speaking engagements. I love doing live events. So my hope is to do more of that, but those opportunities aren't as easy to come by, I would say. So yeah, I definitely have felt like I've hit my stride professionally in my 30s, and I don't have tons of changes that I'm going to make outside of what I just outlined. So yeah, we'll see what's in store for Break Your Budget over the next few years. Somebody actually recently asked this of me of like, where do I plan to take Break Your Budget? And it's so interesting because I do feel like 2025 has been the year where I finally have felt like I have enough in terms of this business. Like, I don't really want to take it any further than where it's at. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm enjoying my workflow. I feel challenged. I feel like I have enough to do. I feel like I'm making enough money. And I just kind of want to be settled in that. I share that because I think there's a lot of pressure and emphasis again on career paths being like so upwardly diagonal, and every year you have to grow and grow and grow. Once you reach your stride, like enjoy the stride. And that's kind of what your 30s are all about, right? It's like actually finding that stability and enjoying it for what it is. So that's what I'm doing. And we'll see what happens with Break Your Budget. Obviously, I'm like forward thinking, I'm not thinking about it, but generally speaking, like I'm pretty satisfied with how I'm monetizing and what I'm doing. I've explored other things and I don't really like them. Like I like what I'm currently doing, and I think that's great too. So anyways, let's move into some of the personal upgrades I'm making as well. So I'm in the camp where I feel like your 30s are sort of the beginning of your prime, right? Like 20s, as you get older, obviously, from a personal standpoint, things change in your body, in your life, whatever. But I do think that your 30s are your prime for women in terms of beauty, in terms of career, and just in terms of building out an abundant life. Like, I genuinely believe that women are their most beautiful. I mean, they're beautiful forever, okay? So don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But like, your prime is kind of your 30s, like late 20s, 30s. And I want to make the most of that because I feel young, I feel happy, whatever. So when in terms of beauty appearance, this is where I think it's super important to lock in on a skincare routine. This is not new. I've talked about this before. I do have an entire video on my skincare routine. If you are interested in checking that out, I recorded that earlier this year. But there are a few changes I've made at 30. First being, I've started incorporating PDRN, which is salmon sperm. I learned about this when I was in Korea. I bought a bunch of it and I will continue to buy it. I also am interested in maybe getting some treatments done with it as well, and generally upgrading and getting higher quality products. So one of my favorite brands is Paula's Choice. I still use a lot of Paula's Choice products. That's mostly what I use, but I did upgrade and get some different types of products while I was away on my trip to Korea and Japan. And I'm planning to repurchase a handful of them. So I have a PDRN product that I don't know if I can find it online, but if I can, I'll make sure I link it somewhere. I had a moisturizer that I really liked. I've been using a lot of Medicube products. I think I've talked about some of those before, and just really upgrading some of my skincare products with higher quality ingredients. And they're, like a little bit more concentrated because as you get older, you really gotta, inject the skin topically with stuff that works. I don't want to do anything in terms of like injectables. I'm kind of trying to avoid, I'll never get filler. Well, I guess never say never, but I have no intention of getting filler. And I'm trying to hold off on getting Botox as long as I possibly can. That being said, if you are in the Chicago area and you have a, person you go to for Botox who's a doctor or like a dermatologist who you really like, please let me know. Because I do think I may get a little bit in between my eyes. I don't want to do it anywhere else. I don't want to have a full forehead of it. But I do, because I have bad eyesight and just like resting bitch face in general, I do kind of scrunch right here, and I feel like that's something I could benefit from. So that's kind of in terms of like face stuff, all I would plan to do. And then microneedling is something that I'm planning to start over this winter. People say microneedling totally changes your skin. I feel like 30 is a good age to start that. It's kind of expensive. I'm doing it over the winter because I don't want to be in the sun. Obviously, when I do all of that, it makes your skin pretty sensitive. I'm under the impression. Again, if you live in the Chicago area and you have a gal who you like going to for that, please let me know. Moving on into personal style. So I've talked about personal style, I feel like ad nauseum on this podcast. But generally speaking, I'm in this era of upgrading my clothes and really figuring out what my style is in general. So this means upgrading my loungewear, upgrading my workout wear, upgrading my day wear, upgrading my outerwear, like pretty much upgrading everything. Slowly but surely, like I'm not doing it all at once, but I am really trying to refine my wardrobe, refine my style. Less is more, and have less clothing items that I reach for all the time, because I do feel like I reach for generally the same couple of things over and over again. So I don't need to have a totally huge closet full of clothes. I just want to have a couple of things I'm wearing often. What I have found is that the more I wear my clothes, the more I do, the more I discover what those little gaps are. So like over the summertime, as I've been going out to dinner, doing more dating, etc., I've realized I need maybe like one or two more evening tops for going out to dinner, going on dates, whatever, that are, for warmer weather. I have plenty of winter weather tops for that, but I don't have a lot of like summer fall tops for that. I have plenty of jackets. I have plenty of jeans. I needed to upgrade some of my like day-to-day loungewear because I feel like I wear the same 3 to 4. I just got a new workout set from Aritzia because I wear my workout sets every single day. But I also wanted to have, or loungewear sets, but I also wanted to have a couple of like elevated athleisure sets as well. So I've made a few purchases to get some of those. So generally speaking, like as I've reached 30, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm 30. Like, I don't really have any excuse to not have my wardrobe sorted out. And like, I should be happy with the clothes that I have in my closet at this point. And if I'm not, like making the concerted effort to make sure that I am. The financials are not really a barrier for me at this moment. And so I'm kind of like, I just want to get it handled. So that is something that I'm really focused on. Material composition is big, making sure that I have high quality natural material clothes. Again, I have lots of videos on that. And then specifically fit. So I have a tailor here. I've gone to her a few times to get some of my pants tailored, my tops tailored. So I think fit is really important. And that is something that I'm continuously focusing on as well. I have had a few people suggest to me to try out like a Nuuly or a Rent the Runway. This is on my radar to do. I just haven't done it yet. I don't know why. It's just like I have a mental barrier around like signing up for stuff, honestly. So it's on my radar to do. I might do it over the winter time for like jackets and stuff. So we will see. Anyways, moving on, these last 3 areas are less to do with appearance and more to do with just like having a wholesome personal life. So first, friendships. I am a one-on-one gal, I've discovered. I've enjoyed friend groups all throughout my 20s. Had a big friend group in LA, but now I'm kind of more interested in having one-on-one relationships with people. Obviously, like all of my friends, the more the merrier, right? Like I want all my friends to know each other, and I personally want all my friends to be friends. I do know people who don't like that. I can't understand it, but I guess, to each their own, right? But I am really focused on one-on-one friendships here in Chicago. Like I want to spend one-on-one time or, 3 people at a time kind of max. I find that big groups of people are just like a little bit overwhelming for me. And I'm not my best self in those sort of environments. Like I'm my best self when I'm hanging out with 1 or 2 people at a time more often than not. So really focusing on nurturing those one-on-one friendships and developing deeper relationships with the friends that I already had here, but also I've made a handful of new friends and I'd like to continue growing and nurturing those friendships as well. And then also finding other women in my same life stage. I think as you get older, people's lives change pretty dramatically and pretty quickly. It's like all of a sudden you blink and everyone's married and has a baby. And I embrace that. I think that's wonderful and lovely, but that's not the phase of life that I'm currently in. And transparently, I don't even know if I want to have kids. So I want to make sure that I'm meeting other women in my age range who also feel that way. I think that's really important to avoid feeling isolated and to avoid feeling like your life path is weird or, not normal, if that makes sense. So I'm really focused on finding other women who feel similarly to me and focusing on embracing and nurturing those friendships as well. It honestly hasn't been that hard. I feel like a lot of people had warned me coming to Chicago, like, oh, you're in the Midwest, like everybody gets married young and has kids. I'm not really finding that to be true. I think you are who you surround yourself with. Obviously, I have friends who are about to have a baby. Like, I think that there's a lot of reality and realness to that. But if you're in a major city, like there's people of all ages everywhere with all different walks of life, whether you're in the Midwest or you're on a coast. And I don't think we should approach cities and areas with such black and white thinking. You can thank my therapist for that. Because a year ago, I would not have had that opinion. Anyways, moving on. Hobbies and exploring seasonal hobbies. This is something now that I live in a city with all 4 seasons. I talk about seasonality a lot. I want to make sure that I have hobbies for all 4 seasons of the year. So I'm not going through any sort of lull in terms of stuff going on outside of work. So tennis is a big summer fall hobby for me. I've been taking tennis lessons. I'm taking a little bit of a break just because I have some travel coming up, but I'm planning to do some drop-in lessons. And I also may join, again, a gym where I have access to tennis courts so that I can continue playing tennis over the wintertime. Cooking is a big one. I feel like I cook more in the winter. Not that I'm not cooking in the summer, but I don't feel like I'm spending as much time preparing meals in the summer just because if it's 6 o'clock and it's nice out, like I want to be outside. I want to be on my balcony. I want to be at the pool. I want to be on the lakefront. I want to be doing things because I know when the winter comes, I'm going to have plenty of time to sit in my apartment in the dark and cook. So cooking for me is more of like a fall winter hobby where I'm spending more time on it, if that makes sense. Needlepoint. This is something I want to start this winter. So I do crochet and I've been meaning to pick up my crochet needles for a while. So maybe recording this podcast episode is the sign that I need to start. But they did just open a needlepoint store like kind of near my apartment. And so I want to learn how to do that. I feel like that would be a really fun winter hobby and also a fun like hobby to do with the gals, if that makes sense, because it's easy. Everyone can do their own. You can do it together, but it's not like dependent on other people too, if that makes sense. So needlepoint is something that I'm planning to start this winter. I feel like it's something that I'll love to do. I know it's kind of expensive, but I don't really care. Moving on, last but not least, fitness. So as I enter my 30s, I've been, all throughout my 20s, I talk about this, huge Pilates gal. I would say around 25, I got a nose job when I was 24. Couldn't walk, couldn't work out, or like couldn't exercise. I couldn't run. I was a big runner, got my nose done, wasn't allowed to run for a little while. COVID happened, so I just sort of fell into walking and never really stopped. Then I started doing Pilates at home because I couldn't go to a gym. And that was sort of when I fell into walking and Pilates. And I would say from 25 up until 29, I was really only doing walking and Pilates, mat Pilates, reformer Pilates. Back in maybe May, so a little bit before I turned 30, I started doing some more weight training where I'm like picking up dumbbells and doing weights. I use Form. I've talked about that as well before, multiple times. I'm really enjoying that, and I'm starting to discover the benefits of doing strength training in that way and balancing that also with Pilates, also with walking. What I'm not going to do is run. I'm not interested in running. I'm not interested in spinning, biking, any of that. I'm a walker. I'm going to keep it that way. Yeah, that's it. But in terms of strength, Pilates, going to continue doing that. I do Pilates now just once a week on the reformer, and then I'll usually do like an at-home mat Pilates. And the rest of the time, I've been doing strength workouts, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I think there's a lot of value and benefit to doing weighted workouts, like picking up actual weights. I use 10 to 15 pound weights. I'm not doing anything super heavy. I am noticing a difference in my body, and I'm really focused on building muscle. And I think at 30 and in your 30s, this is a really important thing to do. I never thought it would be something that I'd like to do, to be completely transparent. But the more I've done it, the more I'm like, I actually feel really good. So I'm excited about this. I also, as I've mentioned, have been exploring potentially joining a gym. There's a gym in Chicago that's like a gym. They have a pool, they have tennis courts, they have co-working spaces and whatnot. I'm thinking about joining that over the winter time as sort of like a third space for me to go to and have a place to work, hang out. I have friends that are there, meet new people, hopefully. Apparently there's lots of attractive men that go to these kinds of gyms. So God willing, I'll finally freaking meet someone who suits me. But if nothing else, at least I'll have another place to go besides my apartment building. I've been hesitant to join a gym in that way because I already have a gym in my apartment. So it's kind of like, why would I pay for another one? But I do think that having a third space where you can leave your apartment, especially as someone who I work in such a silo, would be very beneficial for me. So that is something I'm exploring. We'll let you know if I join, but I do feel like at this big old age, it's time for me to sort of light the fire under my ass in terms of really having places to go during the day. Anyways, I think that's it. If you have thoughts, questions, opinions that are polite, comments you want to leave, suggestions, let me know. If you're in your 30s and you like 30s oriented content, also please let me know. If you have ideas of things you'd like me to talk about or elaborate on, please let me know. And with that, I will catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave me a review. Make sure to follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next week.